Welcome everybody, my name is Paul, and in case you haven't seen my site, I make a lot of videos about very fascinating and unusual subjects, and one of them I specialize in basically is perception and awareness and so on. And for those who might be interested in what school I may have gone to or something, I can only respond that there's really only one school for us all, and we're all in it, and it has to do with our self-knowledge and understanding about our own existence. And it's a journey I've been on for many years, since 1972, and I've met a lot of really fascinating people and listened to so much content. I've read a lot of interesting books, and I've practiced a deep meditation for many years, so I have some things to share, and I encourage people to listen and see if there's anything that applies to you and might be useful. I can share some of the books I've read and some of the real basics. I've studied religions and a lot of ancient history and so on. And here's one book, for example, The Light of Soul. This is a Patanjali. A lot of people know about Patanjali, ancient Indian teacher from that area of the world. And this is a commentary. That's a real famous book, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And then quickly here, Esoteric Psychology. There were 2 volumes. I read these in the 70s, and the amount of information here is phenomenal about the depth and the understanding of the awareness and how beings interact. It's just incredible, actually. And I urge people to kind of get into that a little bit. Another one, The Rays of the Initiations. This existence is all about transformation, continuous unfolding of our existence, and there's many different kinds of beings, from the tiniest things that we can't even conceive of, all the way up to who knows, what the limit is on beings. There's all kinds of weird beings out there, as we know, creatures and insects and birds and stuff. The rays and the initiations have a lot to do with, we talk about the interplay of forces, basically the 7 rays, the various frequency bands that can make up the existence here, the universe, and there's a whole spectrum of infinite variety and of waves and frequencies and shapes and so on. So a few of those books, and one other one I'll get into here just very quickly here, Treatise on White Magic. Now, again, all magic and all those psychic experiences and basically anything to do with consciousness that we can conceive of, dreams and so on, has its foundation in an ancient teaching, an ancient recognition of the fact that awareness, consciousness, is actually embedded in the soil of the cosmos, you might say. And we human beings with our puny little brains can spend a whole lifetime trying to figure this out and intellectually justify and whatever and figure this out. But if you go all the way down to the subtlest things, like the great sages have done and so on, and meditation, and even the same scientists, to get down to finer and finer, and you just say, well, what is this world? It's just energy. It's just sort of a phenomenon, you might say. And ultimately, the sages say that the consciousness goes all the way down to infinity. There is nothing but consciousness. This is the age-old teaching. The yoga is finally, they come to that personal realization, direct experience, the science of the soul, to understand that consciousness, the reason we're able to have consciousness, and all the little bugs have consciousness, and we have a consciousness that has many different domains, like dreams and emotions and mental and so on, we have that consciousness all for one reason, for one cause, basically, which is the fact that God, or whatever you call it, there's an omnipresence of something, and it just is an opportunity for a human being to just get into subtler and subtler experiences of that, and drink as much as you can of this beautiful life, and we get a little glimpse of the infinite. Now, I want to talk today particularly about what's called the self, the capital self. Now, a lot of times when you take a college course in psychology or something, and you're read a book or something, and they talk about the self and who are we, and you go to an employment interview or something, and they want you to put your resume on and who are you and all that, and you get to be a certain age, and you have a lot of different categories on your resume, like, well, I did this and this and this, and so what is the self? And that's an age-old question, and it's the most important question of our whole life. And if we don't ask that question in life, we're kind of missing something here. It's like it's kind of like, okay, well, somehow I ended up here, but I don't really care how or why. So the esoteric way of looking at psychology starts with a greater self, which they call the self, and the capital self, okay? And it's in the Upanishads, you read them, and the great sages, they talk about the self, desire that self. And it's not about your ego, it's about, like, the self that has no name. It's like there's, again, that root of our awareness goes all the way down, because we have the nerves and the atoms and all the different electricity and the phenomena that makes this life, so that we can be conscious. But if there was no root consciousness attached to this body, it's kind of like it wouldn't happen. Okay, there's something subtle in our being, that in this breathing life that we have, it's hard to define, but you can experience it, and then you know for sure, once and for all, that this self that you are, that you have, is it's a oneness. There's not a duality in this consciousness, and that's why they have the self, and they don't have a self like, with a degree after it or a name or anything. It's just, that formless, nameless, omnipresent, ever all existing, root of all, soil of everything. Just like, if you look at the soil, let's say the cosmos is like a soil. This the whole system that we're in, basically, you call one totality of this system, oxygen and everything in it, and all the rays and vibrations and frequencies and sounds and heat and everything, all that stuff, the big soup of the universe that we're in. We're a part of it, and we have the opportunity, as we grow as a human being and understand, we broaden our awareness so that we integrate all the different faculties that we have as a human being, and that grand self, we actually participate in it. You see, there's a place in our being that is neutral, where we're, people call it, I'm doing God's will, or I let go to my intuition, or follow my dream, or I follow my bliss, or I open up to the universe, or I get reborn, or all those terminologies have to do with transformation and unfolding of our awareness. And the reason that we can do that ongoing infinitely for many different kinds of beings is because the universe is really essentially made up of awareness. That's what it is. You can't intellectualize it. This is an experience that we have to have personally, little by little. It's kind of like you can't drink the ocean all at once, so you get a little taste of it and you start sipping. So meditation starts very small, like, okay, just get into that link, follow that link back to the subtler and subtler and subtler things. And we have an awareness of our own dimensions. That's where in one of the previous videos I was talking about how the neutral observation place, where you observe without reaction. It's not easy to do, and especially all the time. So we have to train ourselves and learn a little bit. Like if you're a parent with a bunch of kids, then you'll have to learn how to contain yourself a little bit, or rule yourself a bit more, and get a handle on everything. I mean, but the overall point I'm trying to make is about this grand self that the Upanishads talk about the formless, nameless, silent being, where there's no judgment, no duality, and the opportunity in a human life. We can try to figure out why or have some reason for it, but if the ages say that, if you look in the mirror and you see a human body there, just count your blessings, because hallelujah, you got the body that the angels want, so to speak, so you better start using it. Now, this self that I'm referring to my own personal experience. Okay, when I had a lot of, when I was young, I got into really deep meditation, and without trying, it's impossible to kind of describe, but basically intoxication, bliss and whatever they talk about, you read things in the books and say, well, you're going to experience a lot of joy and bliss or something, and next thing you know, that's exactly what you're experiencing. And then, to try to integrate that into the daily life, because this is where the basic of the old prayers are. We want the heaven on earth. We want to bring from the unmanifest beauty and the joy that we experience as a participant in creation, and we want to unfold, and we want to flower and give off a scent and give off vibration and music and whatever, and unfold and become immersed in consciousness in this beautiful, grand experience that we call life. So self-knowledge, the path of self-knowledge starts when we're born. As soon as you come out of the womb, you're looking around like, okay, what's going on here? This looks like a strange room here. I don't know who these people are. But all our life, if we have the attitude of being open, having the openness to feel more of your own being, including all the talents. This is why people they go to school, they want to discover their talents. And a lot of times people grow up and they're little, and their parents are clueless. Their kid might be a genius or something, and they have no idea. So they maybe some person, like, for example, maybe who never played music. If I had not played trumpet when I was young and started with a guitar, I would be a better guitar player now, because I didn't like trumpet. So there's a lot of things that we live in the world. There's a lot of unconscious people, and we're part of it. We're stumbling around, and that's where self-knowledge is a part of our journey. It has to be, instead of getting up every day, this really, honestly, if you really think about it, it should be our primary goal and interest every single day. Like, okay, well, how am I going to discover more of this existence today? You see, I'll mow the lawn too, but while I'm doing that, I'm going to try to feel and get a sense of my own, existence. Now, when it comes to meditation, my experience is it's just nothing. Do nothing for 15 seconds and you'll find yourself floating into the cosmos, you might say. But it's hard to do nothing, especially for that long. But I compare it to being on let's say you're on a little air mattress and you're on a gentle beach. There's water there, but it's not big waves, and you just lay there and you feel so safe and calm. You're just like, oh, the sun is so beautiful. You feel warmth, and you feel like a certain oneness with life, and maybe you just feel a breeze. Well, meditation is just doing nothing, where you start to feel like in the ocean, and you're just lying on that raft, and you're just like, little waves come. And that self that we want to attain is really our true nature. So we're really just letting go of something. It's kind of stripping off the shells that I call it the paper mache identity. I like this example. How, let's say, for example, you're trying to make a paper mache duck or a chicken or something or whatever, and or maybe this is our own self, and then we pick a piece of a magazine and it has a few pictures on it or whatever, and you slap it on and we make this structure, and it doesn't really look like a duck or a chicken. It sort of does, but it's got all this weird looking things on it. And our manufactured identity is really true. People sometimes make all kinds of tattoos, and they want to be different, so they do weird things with their hair, their nose, their ears, or lips, or whatever, and all to have some kind of identity. But our true identity is so far beyond and so beautiful that we don't need to, there's nothing to impress. We don't need a costume, makeup, tattoos, nose rings, earrings. We just need to breathe, because letting go and being like on that air mattress and floating some part of our day where we just float and be our own, that oneness that we become and we unite with. It's like a sponge in the ocean, in the water. The water, there's a form of the sponge, and yet the water is penetrating and interplacing in the sponge. So essentially, I use this example like, let's say there's a bottle, it has air in it, and there's a cap on the bottle. And the air inside the bottle is exactly the same as the air outside the bottle. There's just one problem. It's just the cap that's on the bottle, which is our manufactured identity. We just kind of have this little cap on us, and we keep all that. We think that air, that beingness, is separate from the being around us. It's sort of, there's an infinity of our own nature, you might say, that when we are taught that and shown that, see, meditation is a practical experience. You have a direct experience of feeling your own existence in the subtlest and subtlest ways, and in a way that's not identified with the senses. You see, so there's inner sound, inner light, inner taste, there's inner geometry, there's inner visions, there's all things come out from the inside out. That's why all designs, all genius, all channeling, all divine inspiration, all of that stuff comes from the root of all things. Just like the flowers in the soil, you look at the forest as one soil that has all the different flowers, and you don't see the flowers. One flower comes up and the other flower next to it, and they start fighting with each other. We're all these beings, and we're all beautiful, and we're all coming from the same source and going back to the same source. So it really makes no sense for human beings to be fighting and destroying it, because essentially that ultimate self that is in me is exactly the same that's in any other being. If you go look, even if you go to, say, I was looking one time and I was in a zoo, and I was looking in the eyes of this, I think it was like an iguana or something. It was staring out the screen, and I was like looking at it like, wow, those are amazing eyes. Like, that thing is looking at me, and I'm looking at it, and we're just trying to figure out, like, I think it's ugly, and it probably thinks I'm ugly. But the same awareness, there's one thing, and that's where a lot of these sages, they just became silent. You see, they just, what's to say? A lot of the greatest sages I've heard about and read about, they just sat there, and they would just sit there and breathe and look around, and because we're all one, basically, we're all one thing, and that's the point where it's all really beautiful. And I think that's one of the points that happens when we realize who we really are, because there's a saying that let go of what you have and receive everything there is. So is that a fair trade? Say, okay, give me your nickel, I'll give you $1 million. So there's a certain letting go and offering up of saying to that infinity, because we talk about God, people say, well, God, and you don't want to worship anybody or whatever, but okay, so forget about the personalization of the God. Just think, okay, it's infinite. Whatever it is, call it energy, whatever, just depersonalize it for a minute and say, okay, whatever it is, it's pretty big. And I don't have a lot of time here, so I gotta try to open myself up and have a certain letting go to open the door to some different kinds of experiences, because in all the religions, there's a lot of beauty in different kinds of religious and spiritual practice and experience, but it could go way, way beyond that. It could be much more fulfilling and much happier and much more harmonious, and you don't need all the costumes, you see. So the experience of this life, that religions, people believe in God. Okay, this God is a lot more than a temple and a church. There's a lot more majesty. How long does it take to make a tree that's 500 years old? that's 500 feet tall, like some of these old trees were. So basically, the idea of the self, the capital self, to kind of summarize here, or make it short, that non-dual, non-local beingness that doesn't need to have an adjective after it, a description or a label. It's just something that flows. And when we get into that flow in our own being, all the other genius that comes out from the creativity that's built into that the inner geometry, the inner music, all the inspiration, the art, and all those beautiful things start to flow out when we start getting into that river of awareness that lets that deepest part of it, we tune in sometimes to that subtle, formless presence within us, and then we express it in a beautiful way, which is a lot of times art and all the beautiful things that human beings have made, and especially sharing with each other. Now, this video has already gone about 21 minutes, and I want to make them pretty short, but again, the qualifications we all have for speaking about this is our own personal journey, and it's relevant without using a lot of jargon and so on, and make things simple, because essentially this life is very simple, but it has an infinite exploration. There's a simple understanding, a simple feeling that we can generate and nurture like a coal. You just nurture that fire throughout your life, and then it expands and expands, and you realize, well, wow, what a journey I've been on, and all the things that this experience, this expression of life has had, and I've been, along on this journey for a long time now. So thanks again for listening. I appreciate it. If people have any feedback, and, hopefully not too much criticism, but I figure the people who are watching this, they're not as many as I'd like, but if even one person finds something useful here, please like and share, and thanks again for listening.